Hello everyone. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about the best coupon token Starships again. We've had a couple of things that changed inside the game since the last time that I covered this type of video, and it's getting tiring with the amount of requests that you'll keep on asking to say, what's your updated version of the best coupon token Starships? So I'm going to go through it. I'm not going to have as many rants as I normally do in these videos because I'm not particularly feeling the greatest today. There's also a couple of errors in this video that I feel really tired and exhausted. So I'll be going through all this really quickly. If you want to have more time on the slides, obviously just go to Facebook and go to my Google Drive link and see the slideshow in PDF format there. There's a list of what we're going to be talking about today. So here's in my opinion the biggest things that changed since my last video. That was about 8 months ago. Biggest changes is, first off, Federation and Klingon captains can fly Romulan starships. And with that same change as well, pretty soon thereafter, they made changes so that mega bundles don't break anymore, which is very nice. Something I did a follow-up video part of like 2 weeks later when I realized, oh, they actually did make that change before I even made that video. So anyway, along with that, in my list in this video, basically when it comes to 3 Starship bundles, only 3 Starship bundles in which all 3 of the Starships are actually good are going to be ones that will be excluded from the list. If it's Starship bundles in which 2 of the 3 Starships are good, but the third one isn't, then I will actually still consider it for this top 15 list. Additionally, when it comes to meta changes, Beam Overload has gotten a significant buff, basically to the point that in both PvE and PvP, it's generally the DPS optimal route to go for beam type weapons. The only time you actually use Beam Fire Will anymore, realistically, is going to be if you're going to be doing a tank oriented build, or if you're in particularly fighting like the Herc or the Feklari, or you're actually going to be using Beam Fire Will. Additionally, thanks to a lot of the new starships that they've been releasing recently, science energy builds are starting to become much more viable inside of the game. It's something that I'll be talking about in like a week or so, about some potential ways to make a science energy build really good. In fact, Timberwolf, like a month or 2 ago, in one of his like oddity builds or whatever he calls those, he did a science energy build without even knowing the meta for the evolving science energy stuff inside the game, and he actually made a very solid build with that stuff there, with avoiding torpedo stuff. It was a straight energy plus some extra sciencey stuff on top of it. It is getting much better inside the game now. With the way things are starting to go, I can definitely see a world where science energy might become the top DPS meta inside the game in about a year or so, if the game is still around. Additionally, as a third thing, as a note for this video, console is finally getting a version of this. Unfortunately, because of rights and negotiations between Cryptic and Xbox and PlayStation, they can't do this direct method with giving you a free C-Source Starship. Instead, their version is that they're going to be giving you a previous event Starship, so like one from like the winter, summer, or anniversary events. I couldn't find any information to tell if this is an account unlock or character unlock. Feel free to let me know in the comments. If it actually is an account unlocks event Starship, that is ridiculously good, and I would have actually preferred that versus for a free C-Store Starship on PC, but that's just me personally. Anyway, again, as I've said before, the reason why they have made the Coupon Token Progress stuff with the featured TFOs inside the game is so that people actually play them, because they've realized generally in this game people don't play their fun event stuff unless they're getting a starship out of it. So during the summer event, winter event, and anniversary event, people participate a lot because they finish the event, they get a starship. The featured TFO events, it's like, well, if I don't care about the item, I just don't play, and I don't worry about it. Which was actually a thing that I did for a lot of the older featured TFOs in this game, just as an FYI. They're doing this so that they're like, well, participate in 3 of these featured TFOs, and yeah, you'll get a starship. And in fact, they changed it from The last time they did this, 8 months ago, it was 3,000 tokens. They changed it to 2,100, so that whenever you completed each one of the events for 700 tokens, all you literally need to do is play the event and then complete it, and to complete all 3 of the events, and you would get your 2,100 tokens to get your coupon. Which is definitely a very good quality of life improvement. I mean, I was even having to do some math to make sure that I got enough tokens last time to ensure I didn't have to spend Zen to finish off my discount token. Very nice quality of life improvement. Obviously, our next one is going to be in January, by the way. They've apparently reworked some of the Borg TFOs, and they're going to have those as part of the queue for the first bit of January before the anniversary starts. And whenever that comes out in January, I'll probably talk more about it and briefly in a video before I get into the other time-intensive stuff in that time. So here's some stuff with what's going on. TLDR for this is going to be basically if it's a starship trait or starship that we're picking, and you have to buy 2 starships to get that trait or console or whatever to your entire account, it's not going to be in the top 10 at all. Additionally, preferences go to ships with full endgame stats. If it's a starship that needs a fleet variant as well to get its full battling capability, it's going to be much lower in the list. There are 2 starships that are going to be quite high in the list, but we'll get to those whenever we actually get to them. So yeah, with that, let's get into the stuff for console for the event ships that are basically from Phoenix packs. When it comes to this, by the way, I'm only going to have 2 slides. I'm not going to cover these very much in depth. Most of the stuff from events are supposed to be fun things. However, these particular 6 ones all each have something in or was a part of the meta at some point. That still is very noteworthy to have. Number 1, obviously, is the Bajoran Interceptor. The Domino console is by far the most overpowered console in the entire game. It gives you fire and cycle haste, bonus damage, recharge speed on your ridge dodge abilities, recharge speed on your torpedo weapons, and an ability to extend it an extra 20 seconds if you continually kill enemies. Which means that this buff could be up 25% of the time. Because of how powerful this silly thing is for basically every build. Basically, if you have access to the Domino console, you basically slot it into your build and it just makes your build better. No matter what type of build it is, even science builds can benefit from having this silly console on your starship. Cool? Cool. Number 2 is the Lucari Hokun science vessel. It's the best AoE sustained healing console in the game. It heals hull and shields. It's almost considered a must-have if you're going to be going super long in the Kobayashi Maru scenario. And because this thing is effective on DPS builds as well as, tank and support type builds. Because it's effective on all builds as a healing console. If you need extra healing, this is probably one of the best consoles to plug in for you. The other one here, obviously, is the Breen Tier 6 Heavy Raider. The Cold Hearted trait is ridiculously good in PvP because of you using pilot abilities allows your weapons to do extra stacking damage resistance rating debuffs to enemies. In PvE, Ox to Bat is a meta thing for cooldowns. So having 2 Ox to Bats on your ship that's already doing stuff for cooldowns, basically your Ox to Bat also does a damage resistance rating debuff to enemies, which allows you to do more damage. It's more ideal to have for tanks, frankly. Generally, the meta right now, DPS players want a tank in their group that's applying Cold Hearted to all the enemies so that they can plug in more DPS-oriented traits so they can still benefit from this trait. Way it is, but STL works that way. Here's 3 other ships. The Krem Science Vessel is basically the Domino console, but it's older. And it's slightly better for science builds, and if you're using one of the flagships, especially if you're going to be tanking in one of the flagships, this console is ridiculously good to have in there for the flagship 3-piece set, so that you can throw out the science console and just use this as your 3rd console there. Now, the Cabal Samsar Cruiser, to my understanding, there's like some point systems on Xbox and PlayStation where you could potentially get enough points to earn this starship and actually have it like a counter log for you. I haven't played on Xbox and PlayStation to know how your point systems work to earn stuff inside of those platforms. And if that's the case, then obviously just earn the Kabali Samstar that way and not worry about it. If you can't do that, then this is a decent one as well for tanks inside the game. It's one of the best self-heals for tactical captains. Engineers obviously have miraculous repairs. That's much better because it heals your shields as well as your hull, but you know, do what you do. Additionally, for the last one here is the Marine Carrier. If you have access to the Tier 5 or 6 Marine Raider, you can add in the Tier 6 Marine Carrier as well. And because of the Bleeding Press frigates that you could put on this thing, this effectively is one of the best carriers in the entire game for your pets doing your damage for you. If you don't have access to one of those other raiders, you should not get the Marine Carrier. Just the way it is. Okay. So for the top coupon token starships for PC, dealing with like the actual C-Store starships, again for this list, what's changed this time for me is we're okay with breaking packs. We want starships that ideally have endgame stats on them. And if it's a starship that we have to buy 2 starships of instead of just 1 to get the trait or console for your entire account, it's going to be much, much lower on this list. So rounding out number 15 at the bottom is going to be the Discovery Raiders. Strike from the Shadows is a decent trait for DPS right now. Depending upon your build, it might not do that much for you, or if you, but it is still a decent trait. Unfortunately, you need to buy 2 starships in order to get it, so that's a bit of a downside. Additionally, we also had what was it called? We had our breast cancer fundraiser thing for STO a while back that a lot of people have these ships because of that particular reason. So if you haven't already, then obviously don't worry about using a C-Store coupon for it. The console's not particularly great. It's more of a if you suck at using dual cannons and are not good at making sure that enemies stay in front of you and are really new to that, then you can use the clicky and get them in front of you for a while. So that's kind of the way that works. Number 14 is the Discovery Science Vessels, and it's just for this trait. The console is complete garbage, but the trait is pretty good. Basically, it's one of the better C-Store science DPS enhancers in the game. Its concept was basically to make science vessels that had intelligence seeding quite a bit more inside the meta, simply because I mean there are a lot of intelligence science vessels in the game, but for the most part, your temporal operative oriented science vessels are quite a bit better for the DPS meta right now. So this trait was to help bridge that gap a little bit for intelligence science vessels, but still allow regular science vessels to still benefit from the trait too. Those 2 types of abilities cause your anomalies like Gravity Well, Tychon's Rift to deal extra electrical damage. It requires 2 ships to get, so that's why it's much lower on this list. Number 13 is more of a usability thing for beam overload captains. The console is stuck to this 1 starship, so you're not going to even really worry about the console. What subsystem redundancies effectively does, by the way, is it basically gives you the resistance stuff of what you would typically get from emergency power to shields through your beam overload ability. The only thing you're really missing is the extra shield power, so it's an extra couple of tiny points of resistance that you're missing. But other than that, your beam overload gives you your emergency power to shield resistance, repair shields if something is down, and extra shield resistance to each facing as well. So basically, if you're doing a beam overload DPS build, you can slot this thing in, and now you can do the meta emergency power to weapons and emergency power to shields duo effectively for your engineering slots. Not have to worry about, man, but it would be nice to have shield resistance. No, just have this trait, and you basically have all 3 emergency power main ones available on your build already. that is why this is here. I thought it was at least noteworthy enough to at least include this in the list. I know most of you probably won't care for something like this, so you if you don't really care about surviving a little bit longer with beam overload, then you don't have to worry about this trait. Number 12, which to many of you will probably be as a really big surprise, is the Malum Light Warbird. This is the cross-faction starship that you get Withering Barrage from. The reason why this is very low in this list is because, as well as whenever they made those changes, they also added some 2,000 Zen and 5,000 Zen starter packs to the three main factions inside the game for Federation, Klingon, and Romulan captains. The Romulan version in particular of that pack, of those packs, the 2000 Zen one, includes the Malum Light Warbird with the Withering Barrage trait. So effectively, like unlike most other ships in this list where it's like it's either from a pack or you're paying 3,000 Zen for it, this is a starship where if you're smart, go on a new Romulan captain and buy this pack, not only are you getting extra stuff for that one Romulan captain, but you're also getting this starship for only 2,000 Zen for your entire account. So effectively, this ship is already 33% off. And so because of that already, like the cost benefit analysis of saving 2,000 Zen for a starship versus saving 3,000 Zen for another starship of using this type of token, it's why I've decided to put this at number 12 in this list. This is a ridiculously good trait still for cannon builds with cannon scatter volley, but because of that particular situation is why it is here in number 12 instead of much higher in this list like it probably should. Okay, all right, let's go ahead and move on. Number 11, as I've said, because none of the ships on the top 10 are going to be starships that you have to get 2 starships to get it for your entire account, is why the Varal and Narendra support cruiser and battle cruiser are here in this list. The trait is really good. It's basically just a cheaper version of Honor Dead. That's available through the C store. That's basically a slightly weaker, more tank-oriented version of Honor Dead. That's better TPS version is obviously Honor Dead from the exchange. Federation Captain is much cheaper than Klingon Captain, so it's up to you whether that's worthwhile to you. It helps everyone from that durability standpoint. And the Temporal Trajectory Shifter is basically a Timeline Stabilizer, but it's from the C store, so it's slightly weaker, but it's still very strong on its own too. If you're willing to buy both starships, this is probably one of the best packs in the game, frankly, for a 2 starship pack for newer players inside the game, just because of how useful this trait is and how universally good this console also is for all playstyles too. Number 10 in this list is going to be the Vastum Tactical Command Warbird. This is because of the trait All Hands on Deck. It's a general usability trait that's good for most starships in the game. In particular, it helps science project abilities, but it also reduces the cooldown of captain abilities as well, which is not as common in this game. Most stuff only reduces the stuff for your general bridge officer abilities. This helps captain abilities as well, so that is pretty nice. The downsides to the command mega bundle starships in general is that they are more oriented towards doing torpedo and mine-based space damage in the game, so those playstyles are not quite as common to most players, and it's also very expensive to get those types of playstyles for most players in the game as well. And of all the traits, All Hands on Deck is the only one that I felt was universally good for all captains too. There also is like improved tachyon beam as well for your carrier captains as well, but there are other things that can help your pets stay alive easier than that particular trait. Number 9 is here not because of the trait or the console, but because of something else that I've talked about before. Effectively, outside of the Rising Corvette that was released over the summer, the regular pilot escorts from the Pilot Escort Mega Bundle, the original one, are generally considered the fastest starships in the game. Because of that, many of your slightly more budget PvP escort builds out there generally include one of the pilot escorts from this mega bundle. Thanks to Romulan Starships being cross-faction now, it's generally considered that, and because the Romulan ships in this mega bundle have battle cloaks, those PvP warbirds have gone into much higher value over the past couple of months. Of the 3 different variants there, I feel the CounterYolo Engineering Pilot Warbird is the best for both a PvP oriented build as well as being able to switch to a PvE oriented one as well for the PvE meta inside the game. With the engineering version, you have enough engineering seats to easily do like Ox to Bat as well as, Marines powered weapons, Marines powered engines, and still be able to do that type of stuff well alongside your typical PvP builds that you see a lot out there. In my opinion, that's the best for a balance between both worlds. It's also full endgame stats with them too. Obviously, if you want more customization upon the looks, you might get all 3 of the pilot warbirds. Or if you really don't care as much about the meta, the Federation ones still look good too. Number 8 in this list is the Day 1 Vandross Pilot Escort from the Allied Pilot Escort Mega Bundle. It's only here because of the trait Promise of Ferocity. This gives you extra bonus damage as long as you remain in sustained combat. This is similar in the general realm as another trait, which will be covered much later in this video. Whenever you use pilot or tactical abilities, you get some extra bonus damage. Which, by the way, bonus damage as a damage category is the same category that that crits fall into. Whenever you do a crit on an enemy, that is considered bonus damage. So you're doing enhancements on that type of damage in your build as well. So it's a very nice DPS trait. You only need to buy 1 starship to get that trait. So there is that, and the starship's not particularly bad either. The console kind of is sucky, but the starship is okay, and the trait's pretty good too. I'm gonna get a lot of flack for this, but that's okay. I still think that the Tactical Miracle Worker Warbird from the Miracle Worker Bundle is still a worthwhile buy for anyone. Yes, sure, redirection arrays for tank captains is nice to have for both factions if you're going to tank on both a Federation and Klingon captain. That we're ignoring for this list. The Crimson Force Field is also nice in PvP to basically more easily kill someone, but that doesn't matter either. The raw stats from the Starship is actually really good because it's a Warbird versus the cruisers of the other 2 variants, the other 2 factions variants. This ship can actually use dual cannons, and its bridge option layout is very similar to the point, very similar versus what you see for a lot of the meta DPS builds for like the Discovery Miracle Worker carriers. So the way that I basically see this Starship is it's basically a budget version of the Discovery Miracle Worker D7 carrier, but it's available to all factions, which means this is the only battle cloaking Commander Miracle Worker Starship available to Federation captains. But it's a 4-4 layout instead of 5-3, and it doesn't have the 2 hangar bays that the Discovery D7 has. 3,000 Zen versus a lot of money on the exchange, in my opinion, is worth it. But I know that a lot of you prefer to have what's it called, the Fleet Miracle Worker battlecruisers, and that's totally fine too. As a tank captain, I think this is a smidget better because of its higher hull base stats versus the Miracle Worker battlecruisers, but that's just me. Number 6 in this list is probably the newest ship on this list, released since the last thing came out, which means this might still be in the new category, as well as these Discovery Science Vessels. And so you may not be able to get this thing whenever you actually get the token. And this is called the Gemini Vanguard Temporal Warship. As I said earlier in this video, science-based energy builds are becoming much more viable in the game right now, and this ship definitely helped in that realm. So the trait isn't particularly strong, but it's okay. Attack pattern beta, Yep, another thing that's wrong there. Attack pattern beta, as well as anti-temper ability, gives you a firing cycle haste, as well as some extra directed energy damage of your particular faction's oriented weapon damage. So if it's Federation, it's Phaser, Klingon Disruptor, Romulan Plasma, and Dominion will be Polaron. Same thing with the console itself. That console's extra 15% directed energy weapon damage is based upon your faction's specific damage. Also, it adds like an extra 20 EPG, and the clicky is basically the point defense warheads clicky, but it's based off of your EPG instead of off of your projectile damage. So in that realm, I mean, like both of these consoles, by the way, do similar damage. So, and a lot of people pick the PD BW on the exchange just because of mainly because it's the best damaging 2-piece bonus to add with the DPRM console. So, doing it in an energy-based build, you could have DPRM plus this guy on there, and you're adding a lot of both energy as well as extra EPG to add to your Starship too. There are a lot of things that start to add up, frankly. And then you still could also by itself consider this almost like a budget version of the point defensive one-power warhead. If you're just going to do a straight energy build and can't afford to get that and the DPR. Number 5 in this list is the Tactical Explorer Warbird. This is the tactical version of the multi-mission science vessels available from the multi-mission science vessel Mega Bundle. Multi-mission science vessels are just science vessels that can use dual cannons and have one hangar bay. That's what they basically are. A lot of people bought a lot of these ships because they were basically tier 6 Vesta starships, the Federation version anyway. The Gorn science vessels kind of look dorky and also look very similar to the new Discovery science vessel, which is kind of funny actually. Anyway, the trade's not very good from any of these ships, and the only console, in my opinion, of the consoles available from the multiple science vessel suite of consoles from the C-Store is the Radiation Bombardment Matrix, which comes from, again, the tactical version of the Explorer Warbird. And of the tactical versions of the Explorer Warbirds, the relevant version is cross-faction. So, and also the tactical version happens to have the best console layout and the best bridge option layout, in my personal opinion, for how I like to fly starships. So, basically the best starship for basically everything, full endgame stats, with the only one that has a console that actually feels meaningful to put inside of a science build. It makes sense that I would put it here on this list. There's also one other science vessel that I'll mention, but it's more of an honorable mention pack that I don't feel like it's worthwhile to break. In terms of individual packs in which it's okay to break, this is the highest ranked science vessel in this list. Number 4 is the last starship that doesn't have full endgame stats, and that's the Morgu Heavy Warbird. And it's because emergency weapon cycle is still ridiculously good in this game. I'm surprised this hasn't received more nerfs. There's a chance that it might in the future, but I really don't see it. I mean, previously people have recommended you to probably get the Arbiter Heavy Battlecruiser. The Morgu is basically just the Arbiter, but it's available to all factions instead of just the Federation. So that is why this is here. It's a nice starship on its own, but its trait is very overpowered, and so it's here at number 4 in this list. Number 3 is basically just a slightly better Morgu that has a slightly worse trait. This is the Gemini Vanguard warship, has full endgame stats. That's why it's a bit better. Plus, its bridge option layout is incredible. Tricks of the trait is a slightly worse emergency weapon cycle that only does the power cost reduction. But at least it's a player-based AOE power cost reduction to both you and to your allies, so that's nice. The console gives you an extra 10% crit severity. And what I didn't change in this picture, but was updated within like a month or two of my last Cubine token video coming out, is that they adjust this so that all Gemini and Gemini Vanguard consoles are usable on all starships. I repeat that, on all starships, not just the Gemini and Gemini Vanguard starships. So that means this extra 10% crit severity off of this console, you can plug into any build that you have, which is very nice to have too. I still think this is one of the better DPS starships that's outside of the exchange and fleet, so there is definitely that. But this is it's still it's a solid suite of stuff together that I feel that it still deserves its spot. And if you actually compare this to the last list of starships, this is the only starship that has kept its exact same spot in my list for both lists. So that might tell you that even like in basically every way that I've like been changing stuff for worthwhile things, this ship has remained a stalwart high contender for these videos. Number 2 is the other Allied Pilot Escort that I consider to be really good, and it's called the Day 1 Ikabar Pilot Escort. It's a very strong ship as well. Its console is good for a science energy build, even though it takes a little bit to learn. And it's only usable on the Allied Pilot Escorts. Its trait Improved Gravity Well is the best science trait in the game that is available from the C-Store, in my opinion. Basically, every science build uses Gravity Well in some fashion. This just makes it really good and much more worthwhile to put onto your build. Technically, you have other traits like Improved Photonic Officer off of the exchange that's leaps and bounds better than this thing in terms of its overall value to science builds, but from the C-Store, it's really hard to beat this guy, frankly. Now, before I get to number 1 in this list, I am going to mention 2 3-starship packs that I feel that they are too worthwhile to break at all. And here they are. Number 2 are the Tier 6 Scimitar flagships. Why they should be broken? Well, first off, they're cross-faction. And second of all, every single one of these starships has 2 things going for it. The engineering and science version both have very strong bridge officer layout and console layout. The science and tactical version both have decent starship traits. And the engineering and tactical version both have really strong consoles that are usable on the flagships. So every single one of these starships has 2 things going for it. Every single one of them has a weakness. I mean, the engine version has a pretty terrible trait. The science version has a terrible console, and the tactical version has a comparatively terrible bridge officer layout versus the other 2. So, I mean, whenever you're comparing them, it's like, yeah, technically, depending on how you want to slant or skew it, one of them has a weakness, but they're all much better if you just get all 3. And then you can pick the engineering or science version. You can plug in these 2 strong consoles on it, or if you have the timeline stabilizer, you can plug in that plus those 2 to get a very strong 3-piece tanking bonus. They are very, very strong starships. One of the strongest in the game from the C-Store, especially whenever you consider the unique consoles available to them. In order to really beat these starships on any other starship, you generally have to get a lot of starship traits and consoles from the or from the exchange to beat these guys, frankly. But of course, they're only scimitars, so a lot of people don't like the lack of maneuverability on those ships for dual cannon builds. The other honorable mention for starships is the 31st century starships. The only reason why you don't see these guys as much is because their aesthetics are really, really weird versus basically everything else in the game. So you have to be more of a, I don't care about the looks, I just want the performance of my starship, and you have to like constantly internalize that for yourself. Or if you just like the aesthetics, then cool, go for it. The shield, a lot of the vantage shields make these ships also look really, really weird, even more weirder than they actually are. So there is that going for them. Like when it comes to the raw stats themselves, all 3 of them, because they're all different types of ships, all 3 of them are very strong ships in their own right, and all 3 of them have very strong consoles for what they're supposed to be doing. As for starship traits, the science vessel and raider have very niche circumstances where you'd want to use them. The cruiser's trait is actually pretty good for the science vessel's damage, though, so there is that. As for the consoles themselves, the Cruiser's console is one of the few taunt consoles in the game. The Science console is one of your general 15% exotic damage clicky consoles in the game, frankly. And the Raiders console is one of the few firing cycle haste clicky consoles in the game as well. So we have very few of these in the game, and so the fact that you can use these on a 31st century vessel makes them all very worthwhile. This particular Science vessel is pretty strong because you can do a Science torpedo build on it. You can do a Science energy with the two-piece from this as well pretty easily. You can also do a Science tank build on this thing because its stats are good enough, plus you got a taunt console available to you from the Cruiser. I guess technically if you had to break this, I would go with the Science vessel, I guess. You don't lose it. You're still losing a ton, but you aren't losing as much as the other guys, frankly. It feels really bad, though. I mean, the Cruiser is one of the best tanks in the game, but it's still good for other energy damage for both beams, and you can still use dual cannons on this thing as well with 4 tactical consoles and such. The Raider, even though it doesn't have a secondary deflector, it has a commander universal temporal operative. Plus, it's as fast as the recent Spock jellyfish. So, plus it has a battle cloak. So, this is generally considered one of the best PvP science vessels in the game, alongside the inaugural Deimos science vessel for its unique broken console. So they're all very, very strong starships too. Anyway, with that out of the way, our number 1 starship, that in my opinion from the C-Store is probably the best buy of them all right now, especially with the recent buffs, is the Cardassian Gilmore Intel Flight Deck Carrier. The other thing that was changed in recent months was there are some changes to escort carriers as well as to flight deck cruisers. They renamed escort carriers to Strike Wing Escorts. But other than that, and their Starship Mastery, they really didn't change much with them. Funny enough, the Romulan version still didn't have its name changed, but whatever. Now, for flight deck cruisers, they did change them pretty significantly. They changed their name to flight deck carriers, and what they did with that change is that they gave all of them an extra hangar bay, and they also allowed all of them to be able to use dual cannons now, which is a big deal. Which pushes this guy really, really, really high up in terms of priority. Its trait was already ridiculously good. I mean, Calm Before the Storm was already used by a lot of energy builds, but additionally, because that bridge offshore ability recharge speed as well on this particular ship makes it so that it's still usable on science builds as well. Now, the reason why I didn't include this ship before in the other list was because I was like, well, sure, the Cardassian Flight Deck Cruiser was good, but it wasn't great because it couldn't use dual cannons. And you had the Cardassian Science Dreadnought, which was okay, but and it's the only Science Dreadnought outside the exchange, which is why it's like, well, 2 out of 3 stars just for that pack, probably not worth it to break it. Now I'm like, well, unless all 3 starships are good, it's okay to break it. The Cardassian Escort sucks, frankly. With different things that have changed over the past couple months, that thing is just garbage now. The Science Dreadnought is just okay, but its trade and console suck. This starship, the only thing that sucks is the console. But the console is still good for very early levels in the game when you have like no damage on your starship. This thing still puts out decent damage at super low levels in the game. Once you get past level 30 though, then yeah, you feel how bad this console actually is and you have to replace it with something else. Outside of that situation, it's a very solid trait, and it's a very solid, well-rounded starship for beam builds as well as cannon builds. It's a little lackluster for doing science damage, but outside of that, it's a pretty solid starship in my opinion. It's slightly high on engineering bridge after seats, but it's got commander intelligence, so I mean, you can use override subsystem, say safeties 3 and a couple of other intel abilities if you want to use some of those extra engineering slots, frankly. But anyway, there's the video for you all. Hopefully that wasn't too painful for you. with me struggling to speak in this video. I am working on. I've decided to just scrap my old script for my SEO economy video that should ideally be coming out towards the end of next week. If all things go well with that, I should be able to finish it and then put up a new video talking about all of that. It's gonna be a very long video though. Unlike other videos on the channel, expect that video to be over 2 hours in length. So yeah, there is that coming up in the near future. You can also see my Google Drive in the scripts section. If you want to see what the other ideas and things that I'm also working on in the meantime for this channel in the near future. Thank you all for watching and enjoy the rest of your day.